Previously on agentpalmer.com, Crichton's Next is a TED Talk with a novel preamble. Somewhere You Feel Free plants appreciation for Tom Petty and Wildflowers album, and I'm still amazed that Evelyn and I had such similar stories and experiences getting to the producer title because the variables are mind-numbing. This is the Palmer Files, episode 60, featuring Matt Kiefer, who is here to discuss his career as a librarian. As you'll soon learn, it's not just the Dewey Decimal System and shushing people. It's a library of things and events, plus growing into being organized, helping with technology, some library myths, and much, much more. Are you ready? Let's do the show! Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 60th episode is Matt Kiefer. Matt is a librarian in Maryland, and he's here because outside of a library and helping me check out books or looking for references, I've never really talked to a librarian, and definitely not about why and how they became a librarian. That is why Matt is here. As you'll soon find out, he's not the prototypical shushing librarian, but those do exist. What you're about to hear is Matt's librarian origin story, as well as what his job entails. You'll hear about the community aspect of libraries and learn that Matt works at a library of things, not just physical media like books, DVDs, and CDs. We also discuss recommendation engines, being extroverted introverts, and dispel a few library myths. For example, the library is not necessarily a quiet space. Before we get going, remember that if you want to discuss this episode as you listen or afterwards, you can tweet me at Agent Palmer, my guest Matt at Psionic M, that's Psionicm, and this show at The Palmer Files. When Matt's not at work, you can watch him play video games on twitch.tv/psionicmonkey, where he is a variety streamer playing whatever currently strikes his fancy. Don't forget, you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com. And of course, email can be sent to thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, maybe this podcast is a quiet space. Matt, you are a librarian, so do you just check out and check in books?
A little more involved than that. With my line of work, we have a lot of technology instruction. Basically, I help Miss McGillicuddy putter in and get on a computer and Google her Bing so she can get to her Facebooks and go from there.
Hold on. There are books in your library, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, all right. I mean, because I'm going to take a wild stab that I'm older than you, but I remember when we first got some of those newfangled screens and computers in the library when I was in like middle or high school, and it only changed the world for those of us who knew a world beyond AOL.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, I mean, the thing about that world expanding is you and I hear a dime a dozen tale of people who have been exposed to identity theft, scams. Throw your money into this sinkhole and you'll get, a special Squid Game token that, has absolutely no monetary value except for what we say it is. And then, giggle, all your money was stolen. And this poor guy in a library has to look at you sideways, but keep that customer service smile on while he tells you, I hate to say, but you got screwed. You have to find that right balance of politely saying you're screwed without actually saying you've been screwed over.
Now, so what kind of library do you work at? Like community, school,
Sure.
What?
So I work in one of the 19 branches for my public library system. in Maryland, and it's basically public community library. My library services the larger portion of the county's population.
Okay.
In the before times, we would have on average 1,300 people come through the door each day, which is a lot.
Okay. And when you say before times, are you talking before the internet or before the world happened?
Oh, before COVID.
Okay. All right.
Before the pandemic in we'll say March of last year, we were averaging about 12, 13, 1,400 if we had a really big programming day for story times or what have you. We'd have anywhere between 12 to 1,400 people come through the door, and that's pick any day of the week, and that's what it was.
So I have to stop you because I should be, and look, I'm a very big proponent of reading, as has been like I guess a submission of this podcast of the last few episodes. But one of the things that I don't do is I don't frequent my own public library. I buy my books, and I know that I should support my local library, but I want to support the authors, and I guess I'm torn in between there. But sure. 1,300 people in a world where there's internet does seem like a lot to me.
It's to give a point of comparison, the branch that I work at, if it was a library system unto its own, would have been the 6th largest in the state of Maryland. Okay. So our sister branch would have been the depending on the year, because some years we do better circulation and people count being number of people who come through the doors, who come to programs and whatnot, and they do a little better. So we'll say the 6th and 7th place spots alternate between the two of us.
Okay.
And then my library system is probably about 3rd largest. The one that's in the state of Baltimore. Listen to me. The city of Baltimore.
Yeah.
There we go. Is probably one of the largest operating library systems, but they're also the state's library resource center. So everybody and their grandmother goes there to take a look at any of the archive materials that they have. Their reference collection is enormous. Their special collections is just mind-boggling. They measure, for as a point of comparison, not in square footage for the amount of shelving that they have, but square mileage.
Okay.
Which
yeah.
Yikes.
I mean, my house feels like I'm getting there.
Right. Yeah. When you collect enough stuff and you just like, oh my God, it's everywhere.
I got a new bookshelf this summer. It's full. You know, I didn't have a shelf before, got a new shelf full. Okay. So
just put it all on there. Yeah.
You know, a part of it's cleaning too. Like the thing that I'm sure all librarians hate, I'm going to make an assumption here, is like putting a book sideways on the shelf, because like it's got to squeeze in there somewhere. So I undid all of that, and that's kind of how I ended up filling up a bookshelf. But now all of my books are upright and, you know, not in order. Let's not go crazy.
No.
I don't need to Dewey Decimal my own house.
Yeah. But if you know where it is, then that's fine. Yeah.
I mean,
hopefully. Maybe.
Yeah. There are times when I'm like, where is this? What? It's all right. I only read one book at a time. So as long as I know where that book is. But I will tell you, the moment that my house feels like a library the most is when I'm in between books, when I just finish one. And I just start wandering around my house because I don't have a dedicated library. So it's, okay, check the bookshelf in my office, the bookshelf in the living room, in the bedroom. Oh, I don't know what I want to read today. Just wandering around my house aimlessly. Like if you were to Big Brother me, you'd be like, he does live in this house, right? Like, what is he doing?
Yeah. What's he up to?
I could use a librarian for my own house. You got any tips?
Well, what I will say is that most of my work, besides, I call it instruction. and I don't want to delve too much into library world speak or anything about it, but a lot of what I do is instructional in nature. I'm usually the ones working with, like I alluded to before, the Miss McGillicuddy, binging her Google to get to the Facebook or what have you.
Now, how crazy has that been? Like, because obviously you've been doing this for a little bit. You weren't doing that. It's not like you started last week. So do you understand the old people speak when they're trying to do the tech?
It's frightening how much I understand them now. It's and she is not going to appreciate me saying this in a podcast, but I have to say that I've learned to translate a lot of that kind of language from my own mother, because it'll be like she'll call me and say, all my pictures are gone. Well, okay. You mean the pictures folder? No, all the pictures that are on my desktop.
So the icons.
The icons, yes.
Okay.
The icons
yeah. No, I mean, look, I'm not going to call out my own mother necessarily, but my own mother, I've been schooling her on some of the terms over the last 20 years.
Right.
Yeah, I feel you.
Yeah, she has gotten actually a lot better. I will say that now that I have, my niece was probably about 5, maybe 6 years old. And I get this frantic call as I'm driving into work from my mother. All my pictures are gone. I don't know what she did. There's these weird tiles. I can't get to my email. She didn't say she couldn't Bing her email, thank Christ. But she's in like a near state of panic. And my dad is overseas. This is about 2 years ago at this point. He's overseas. It's an expensive phone call to find out that she can't access her email or do anything. So what my niece had done, when I pulled off to the side and it's like, okay, Mom, hold on. What happened? What does it look like? And she'd say, all the pictures keep flipping over. I was like, okay. She said it's a tiled mode, or tablet mode, whatever it's called, in Windows 10. I'm like, all right, so I want you to look for this icon in the bottom right. You know where the clock is? Let's work from there. So we found the icon. I got it to change out of tablet mode, which, don't get me wrong, if for folks who can do this, I have infinite level of respect for people who work customer support lines for Dell, for Hewlett Packard, whatever you want to pick, because it has got to be rough trying to talk to people like my mother in a near fit of panic.
Yeah.
To tell them, here's how you get it out of tablet mode because your grandchild set it to that in the first
place.
A very
big portion of it is getting the person to calm down. Like I was at one point in my career, I was a hybrid marketing IT person for a very small office. And look, you don't want me to be your IT person, because I especially in a hybrid model where I've got my own stuff to do, because you're calling me when something's already messed up and you have stuff to do and you're not happy and I'm not happy. And what did you do? I didn't do anything. No. What did you do? No, it just did this. Okay. All right. Move aside. Let me, whatever. But I do have to ask, we've spent the last few minutes and a good portion of this early on talking about technology, and you work at a library. Shouldn't we have just been there are still books in the library? Like, do people of the 1,300 that you mentioned in the before times, are most of them coming for the access to technology, or are most can you give me a percentage of how many people are actually coming for books?
Sure. I would say that the lion's share, and I would put that at about 70 to 80%.
Yep.
Are coming for library collections, and I use that term very broadly. We're talking books and CDs, the usual stuff you would find.
Okay.
The DVDs. We are a library system that loans out what we call a library of things. We lend out Chromebooks, for example, and mobile hotspots for internet access. But on top of that, we lend out telescopes, we lend out science kits, book club kits, even fishing rods. I never honestly would have thought to do that. And now if I was ever posed with the chance to go fishing, I could borrow a fishing rod from the library. In terms of technology use, it's a tough thing to answer because speaking specifically about mine, the 80% physical media checkout stuff holds true.
Okay.
However, if you went 20, 30 minutes anywhere along the Beltway, east or west in my area, you're going to start ending up in branches where the technology usage is significantly higher. And a lot of it is driven by everything is increasing. Well, everything's increasingly online. Everything from applying for government benefits, applying for jobs.
Okay.
Everything like that is connected to some web portal.
Yeah.
And some of them have smartphones. That has also been the sole experience that they have with any computing at all, is they're not native to a mouse and keyboard like you and I are.
Okay.
So watching them go through that,
finger typing.
If we're lucky, if it's not otherwise just straight up fist mashing into the keyboard and hoping for what's best coming up. So in terms of like classic library usage, I see a lot of classic library usage, but I'm also the technology fixer-upper guy with our downloadable ebooks, with our downloadable video. Because there's just so many damn platforms out there that we support that it's horrifying.
Now, did you? I mean, two questions, and I usually ask them separately, but I'm going to ask them together.
Okay.
Did you want to be a librarian, and do you go to school for that, or do you just happen to be a librarian?
So in the state of Maryland, I'm going to answer the second question first.
Sure.
In the state of Maryland, you don't have to go to school to be a librarian. It doesn't hurt.
Okay.
Usually, when I was applying for librarian positions back then, it was a positive thing to either be in a Master of Library Science program or to already have the degree, because the alternative is if you're promoted to a librarian, you have to go through the Library Associates Training Institute. It's basically, and I don't say this as a derogatory term, it's like a night school for librarianship. It's a very compressed curriculum to get you through the basics of reference work, reader's advisory, where you recommend materials for people to check out and read, basics of technology instruction, library program planning, and so on. And then the reason a lot of library systems moved away from that is that it is a pay-for process to go through. If you have an applicant that you have to put through LATI, you're putting out several $1,000s for them to be certified with the state that they can be a librarian.
And hoping that they stay to keep
Correct.
Your investment. Okay. Yeah.
Yep. 100% correct. It's and more often than not, they do stay because they see that the investment usually is pretty well paid off.
Now, do you get to forego that if you've got the degree, or is that?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yep. So if you have an MLS degree, a Master in Library Science degree, you don't have to go through any of the LATI stuff. You are still subject to renewing your certification with the state. What's nice about having an MLS degree versus going through the LATI, the Library Associates program, is that degree is a little bit more broadly applicable to other library fields. It's not limited to just, say, public librarianship. Okay. You could do academic higher education librarianship. You could be a school media specialist for elementary, middle, and high schools.
Okay.
And, it's just, it greases the wheels a little bit. So you have more options for that degree.
Do you have that degree? Or
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Okay.
I got my degree in 2013.
So you and it's Masters of Literary Sciences.
Library Sciences.
Library Sciences.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised it's not arts, but that's a whole.
Yeah,
it's a small distinction. I will tell you, and this is another soapbox for another time maybe, but when you go through what is of sciences and what is of arts, there are times when I wonder who was drunk at the wheel when they were deciding what was sciences and what was arts.
Was an art. Yeah.
But obviously, so you went to school for this, and you are this. Did you always want to be this?
So turning on the Wayback Machine, a little tiny biography about myself. I started working for the public library system when I was a sophomore in high school.
Okay. First job?
First job.
Okay.
First job. I had few other side jobs here or there, but the main one was the library system.
And is this the same library you're still at?
When I started part-time in high school, it was a different branch of the same library system.
Okay. All right.
And I started that job as basically it was a form of penance, because my mother was beyond tired of paying my overdue fees. She was beyond tired of yours. I broke a lot of books as a kid. I'm
so confused. First of all, are all the overdue young Matt? Are all the overdue fees are they all books, or I mean back then you still could get like CDs and cassettes and all that stuff, so is it all books?
It was all books back then.
Okay, all right.
And it's just because I'm not a tidy person at all.
Some of us grow into it. Like I'll gladly admit that you and I probably had the same room in middle and high school. Now I can keep a house organized, but I'm almost 40. I am double the age from my optimal mess. So it took me a while to grow into it.
Yeah.
So there's still hope for you in the future, is all I'm saying.
I'm going to cling to that like a piece of flotsam in the middle of the ocean, because God help me, I need that to be true. But yeah, I mean, I was losing books all the time. I would find them 6 months later after they've been paid for. My mother is a saint for a lot of reasons. One of them was that she didn't ever kill me for the amount of money I cost her.
I mean, it's books though, right? It's not like the devil's music, or
it could be. Yeah, it's not VHS tapes from the local video store. It's not video games returned late. Yeah, she made very sure that my library card was not the kind of library card that could check out VHS tapes back then.
Okay,
it was just basically strictly books, strictly CDs, because they had the same fine system of, it was like 20 cents a day.
Okay,
I think.
All right.
So when I was pretty close to being able to work and just get like a work permit, she just sort of handed me this application and said, "Here, go forth." Go forth and apply.
And the library's like, "We can't take you. We need all the money from the fees." Right?
It's like I could have built a wing on the branch that was very close to where I live. It's a tiny, tiny branch, built out of a schoolhouse, yada yada. It very small.
Okay.
So yeah, I had that job part-time. I was what was called a circulation assistant. Basically, it was the shelving of library materials and checking out library materials.
Okay.
And I held that job through graduating college. So that was 6 years,
I'd
say.
Yeah.
Thereabouts. I started in 2000, graduated in 2007. So 7 years. We'll just
sure.
That.
Yeah.
And then I got a full-time job with the library system, still within the circulation department. And hey, back in 2007, little did we know, you took and you kept the job you got, because 12 months later, the economy imploded for everyone else but the very rich.
Yeah, pretty much.
So you stuck with it because, back then it's either that or you just wait in the middle of it all. And no thanks.
I understand taking the job because it's there and it's something you've been doing, and you've been there for 7 years, and you've probably done a little bit more. You've probably done a few more of those quote unquote job description, other duties as assigned.
Other duties as assigned.
So
yes.
You take it because it's there, but did you enjoy it? Like, was it like okay, this is a few? I mean, we're going back and forth. I get that,
sure.
But like, was it there's a career in this, or I'm just going to take this for now? Did you really enjoy it?
I would say that I enjoyed it enough that I wanted to move up and become a librarian.
Okay.
Which, as I alluded to before, there's one way or the other. You have to go through some form of study. It's either you interview and get the job and are put through the library associate training program, or you go through and get an MLS degree and super great. Throw him at a branch. He's got the library science degree. He wrote the checks for for this
Yeah.
degree. He's probably okay. We'll chance it.
Yeah,
You know?
sure.
So I think it's like a lot of people feel about careers. And I think for our age cohort, especially, we're kind of at a reflection point with a lot of what we want work and a career to be going forward. Like right now we are in a non-trivial amount of upheaval. There's a lot of talk about, repositioning the library to be more of a community space and perhaps de-emphasizing having a diverse collection in favor of what they just call spaces, more seating areas, more tables and whatnot for you to check out, like library laptops to apply for jobs or whatnot.
Yeah.
And try to move away from a more static setup on the floors and try to be a little bit more flexible, explore how to change the spaces to change with your community.
Yeah.
And a lot of that sounds really good on paper, but everything like that has growing pains with it. Change always has growing pains with it. It wouldn't be change if it wasn't. And right now, what they're running up against is, and this is not just my library system, but just libraries in general. It's meeting the interests and needs of an older but still significantly tax-paying part of the population that really just wants that latest James Patterson book, and then the needs of like the younger set or anybody really that, in order to participate in society, you have to get a driver's license. But the only way you can do that these days is booking appointments online.
Okay.
To get your tax forms, you have to do it online. To apply for Social Security and Medicare, apply online.
See, and to me, right, I understand the dilemma, but I also think that, look, maybe it's because we romanticize the book, and there's a part of me that wants to say like, well, I mean that wants to that will always say there's nothing like reading a physical book. Like there's nothing. I've read books on Kindle. I don't like it. I'll do it. I don't like it. It's not for me. In that regard, I am a 72-year-old man. I'm not waiting for the next Patterson, but
I take what you mean.
Although I can tell you, if those people could just wait 6 months, every book sale I've ever been to has 50 copies of the last Patterson. So it's there for probably whatever. Anyway, I understand the space issue. I actually came across, I don't know I think it was a podcast the other day that was talking about a library to go somewhere in the Carolinas where they, bought a van or they got a thing and they take the library out to more rural places that don't have that kind of stuff. And of course, that's a solution for other areas, not your area necessarily, but that's a solution for other areas where it's the physical books that are the problem. And those people probably still have a connectivity issue. But one of the things that gets me is that those spaces exist elsewhere. Like, I think one of the things that's the disconnect for the tax-paying public is that we are paying for this library, let's put it to our use, as opposed to we've got this other space that's not being used, that may not be ours, and let's do the program there and keep the archives together. And there's this disconnect because, well, it's our library. Like, I do ask, I mean, all that aside, I do have to ask though, I do know that there are those unsavory few who go up to the police and who go up to the government officials and the policemen and anybody who might be paid by the government, whether they are or not, and says, you work for me because I pay my tax. Do you hear that even at the library?
Knock on wood. The only time
okay,
I got to do it because it's the only time I ever really have people to talk to me like that is when they've already crossed the line and I have to ask them to leave.
Okay.
And it's usually for behavior. I'm a fairly go along, get along type of guy. I can live with you being on your phone if it's not otherwise violating library rules. If you're not swearing up a storm, if you're not talking, extremely vulgar things or whatnot,
Yeah.
you're ordering a sandwich and you're kind of loud about it. Is it annoying? Yes.
But it's going to go away in a couple minutes. How long does it take to order a sandwich?
You'd be amazed. You would be absolutely amazed sometimes where it's just
wait, hold on. So you're not the prototypical librarian or I mean, like, I guess for a little joke, when you're taking your MLS, do they teach you how to properly?
They didn't. They did not teach me how to shush people properly. And it's so funny because, if my husband was here, he would have a great time with this, is that when I'm at work, I am an extroverted introvert is the fairest way to put it.
That's fair.
I'm performing, I'm animated.
On this podcast, I'm an extroverted introvert.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I'm engaging, I'm happy to have a conversation with almost anybody about anything that's pretty close to library related. But then as soon as I would get home and we have to go to this party, silent as a stone. And it drove my husband crazy.
So he's seen you at work, like he's seen you in action.
A couple times, yeah.
Okay.
Usually he always manages to come in right when everything else is practically on fire. So it's like, oh, look, here's me and I'm harried and hassled. Why are you here? But yeah, don't get me wrong. There's still a couple of the central casting shushing librarians out there. I work with a handful of them myself. They don't like me because I am not a shushing librarian. I'm more like I save my confrontational energies for the really gnarly stuff.
Okay,
for lack of better phrasing.
The should be trending on Twitter if we took a video kind of moments.
Well, not even so much that, but if there's a guy, and I hate to say it like this because it makes it sound like this happens all the time. It really doesn't. If I have to go talk to the guy looking at porn on the computer, that's where my energy is going to go. I don't give a damn about a person on their phone in the magazine area ordering a sandwich. I really don't. Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Because one has a more negative impact on the other. Is it annoying? Yes, that someone's on their phone. This guy is looking at porn, and one's own relationship with pornography notwithstanding, it's not permitted under library rules.
And it's not really a public thing.
It's not really a public thing. It's not a public thing. And I hate to say it, but if it starts with that, there's a few other branches that can go down, and none of it's good.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so I'm already making this podcast really flavorful, aren't I?
Well,
talking about this stuff.
Well, so all right, let me diverge then and say you were a reader, obviously, all these fees. Now you're a librarian. So you're reading all the time now?
Nope.
So you're watching movies all the time now?
More accurate, yes.
What? Okay, so what's the perk now? I mean, if originally it was to save money and now you're all around the books that you're, spending money on, what's the perk? I mean, and I say perk, I know you get paid. I know it's your job, but there's got to be a perk for you now.
So there's a couple. One of them is I know when, for example, new video games will be added to the catalog, and I can be one of the first to reserve them.
Okay.
So I save that. What is nice is for books and audiobooks, depending on how the publisher feels about publishing these things early, we get what are called ARCs, or advanced reader copies of material. So 4 or 5 months in advance of publication, there's a pretty rough draft version of a book that's being put out there that I can download. Essentially, I can download it to a Kindle or to my iPad, because they don't actually do as many physical copies of these anymore. And they definitely don't these days, because printing them, it stays stuck overseas in some shipping port in China.
Or it would end up on eBay.
Yeah. So getting to read that stuff well in advance of everyone else is nice. I've done that for a couple performers I follow. I'm a big follower of RuPaul's Drag Race. So when the drag queens Trixie Mattel and Katya did a book on modern womanhood, and I use that with massive sarcasm quotes. And, I had to read it because they're just
so
two
you
of my
are
favorite.
still reading. It's not. It's
Yeah.
it's just not your go-to anymore.
It's not as much, no.
Okay. But I do have to ask because it feels like part of the librarian shtick. Hey, Matt. I'm a very big fan of spies and sports and history. What should I recommend something to me? Like, do you get the recommend? Like I immediately go to Clerks. What's that movie with that guy and that thing?
Yeah.
Right. Like, how vague can we be? But do people ask you for vague books or for that thing written by that guy that did the thing?
Those, if it's a good day for me, I can just knock those right out of the park. My Google Kung Fu skills are pretty good.
Okay.
And we also have a fair amount of database access. We use something called Novelist. It lets us find what we call read-alikes to what you read. So if you liked Ready Player One, you might like I'll just pick something. Wool by Hugh Howey.
Okay.
It's another dystopian novel. So this might
now
fit the bill.
How does it compare to? I mean, because you're in that system. So how does that compare to, say, like being on Amazon and suggested reading? I mean, clearly, I know they're different databases. They're running on different AIs, but obviously, you've been able to see both. Like,
yep.
Is Amazon okay, or are they just going for the buck?
Amazon, for things like that, for like books, music CDs, and DVDs, they're okay.
Okay.
There is and I mean, you hear all this talk about the algorithm, and the algorithm for a lot of their sales data for that is like, usually if someone's bought this, odds are high they will have bought that. If it was something where they bought it as a one-off, then the algorithm starts to figure out after a while, okay, that's probably not the genre that they're reading. That was more likely a gift that they gave.
Okay. And
so it gets put into that bucket. Whereas if I had bought 3 different James Patterson novels across a 9-month period, because he publishes every 15 minutes, it feels like, it really does. I mean, he has books in every age level now. It's mind-boggling. But if I bought, several of those, then the algorithm thinks, okay, this is a guy who really liked this. Let's bubble up a couple Grishams or David Baldacci novels on there just to see if he might take a bite with that.
Do you know what your algorithm is based off of then?
Oh, God. My Amazon.
No, not yours. The library one.
So Novelist database, I'm not sure which algorithm it uses, but what it does do is it does pull from several major industry publications. So Library Journal, Kirkus Reviews, and a couple other places. So it's like, okay, especially with Kirkus goes out of its way to say this one reads enough. If you are a fan of James Patterson or Danielle Steele or Debbie McComber, or take your pick. Yeah. The software that database is used will be like, okay, Kirkus says this for this book, and then over here we have this for this book. There's 2 overlaps on this, so this might not be a bad choice to push forward as a read-alike.
An option, yeah. Mm-hmm. I might have to go to you for my next books. I mean, in fairness, my to-read list is probably a third of the books in my house, so I've got a ways to go.
Might be a minute.
But I might call you. I might have to bother you at work for like that. Because I've been fairly lucky and selective. Mm-hmm. And it appears that it's going to stay that way for a while. But like,
well, I like what you like.
I mean, that's part of like curating my own library is like, some of this stuff I just don't think's going to be around. Or I've been reading a bunch of Crichton lately. That might be the most mainstream author that I really read. Dayton's not publishing anymore. So like, I'm out here on my own, right? Douglas Copeland just published a new book, but I'm I'm a stickler for completionism, so like I still got 9 more books before I get to whatever he published this year, and but so you do read some of the preview stuff now.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you have like library regulars that are like, you keep recommending me great stuff,
mm-hmm.
and they just come back to you like, I'm no, like getting your haircut by that one person. Like, no, I want Matt to recommend me stuff.
We have our own followers in our branches, and it varies for the 2 big circulation branches that we have. Every librarian has 1 or 2 people in a fan club. Some fan clubs are bigger than others, for sure, in a given branch. But I do have a handful of people who like my stuff. But I literally wander all over the map with it. It's like one time I'll put out a book like Freakonomics, and then I'll
for
put
like
out a
quote unquote library picks.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah,
that's a big responsibility, isn't it? Like, I mean, people are going to be like, I mean, that's like your top. But you only get one shot. I mean, you get one shot at however long you change it. But that's like your top 5 in MySpace. Like, I mean, this is big. This is people are going to look at you if you put out a bad book.
Yeah, that's admittedly true. But I've also never been shy about putting up books that kind of can get the side eye a little bit. What's both a blessing and a curse about having such a high circulation branch is that I have at any given time at least 5 books that I can put out there. Are they the 5 that I want to put out at that moment in time? Almost never. But it's like I put out books that are going to be kind of catchy, kind of fun. There's one book. There's what's his name? Edgar Cantero wrote a book called Meddling Kids, and it's somewhat of a spoof of the Scooby-Doo books, but this time the mystery is actually real. It's dark, it's eldritch, it's terrifying. It was a terrific audiobook, so I put the book out, I put the audiobook out. For somebody that wants a thriller, but maybe not like the usual run and gun kind of thing, I put out a story called Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows, which, I put that sucker front and center. Just so people, it's like, what, why? And we have a non-trivial South Asian population coming in here, so they're like, what is this? This is no.
I mean, you are technically below the Mason-Dixon line, so I mean, you do have to watch a little bit. I mean, you're not the South, but you're not the North either.
Right. I have yet to, if there's been complaints, it's never been directed to me.
Okay.
About what I've been putting out there. I definitely don't put out like incendiary stuff or stuff that could be incendiary. I don't put out books like God is Dead or
but are those books in the library?
We still collect material like that.
Okay. It feels like there are people out there whose sole job it is to light the fire. And if you've got that book on your shelf in a public library, then they're going to find it and take a picture of it and be like, I can't believe blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we still do. But the thing about it is that what people have to realize and understand is that, and this is not a right or left religious atheist thing, there is literally in a good library going to be something that just pisses you the hell off that it's there.
I can see that. That makes, I mean, good luck finding that for me, but I understand.
Right.
I mean, some of us are fairly open and will not be shocked by anything.
Yeah. And most of the complaints that we get are, I don't want to say, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm dismissive because I'm really not. I understand why people, they feel invested in this library and they feel invested in what material they or their children could borrow. So again, I'm saying I'm not being dismissive of it, but when they're talking about a book where they perceive a main character being disrespectful of their parents, I'm like, well, okay, let's have a conversation about this. Is that you're looking at a teen novel. Okay. So already you're, I hate to say it like this, you're kind of behind the 8 ball. If it's a teen novel and it's teen centric, guess what there's going to be?
It's
Drama.
it's teen centric. Like
it's teen centric. It's drama. It's friction with a capital F written in gold filigree and fancy curly cues everywhere. It's just how it's going to be. So
it's the my husband's name is, but it's Mr. Drama. Me and Mr. Drama, like all over the front of the notebook.
Pretty much.
Yeah. All right.
Mm-hmm.
I got it. Like,
so
yeah.
We'll have that. Then there'll be people who are like, well, there was one book, and I'm trying to think of, this was one that actually caused a little bit more of a stir. And this was somewhat of its acquisition was a bit of an accident, it was a book, and I cannot for the life of me remember the title for it. So I'm my own worst enemy here. I'm that which I hate. The one who doesn't remember the title of a given book. I could probably find it if I could access the memos from work. But it was a book that said that teenage girls were being funneled through this cult of transgenderism, which when you use the phrase cult of transgenderism, you already know which way this goes.
Yeah.
As far as the political spectrum is concerned. And so it's a book with a particular viewpoint, and they were upset that we didn't have more copies of it. As a system, we own 10, which is vastly more than we would have really had for a subject that is relatively a niche subject.
Yes.
It's not mathematics. It's not.
I have to tell you, I'm still shocked that people get that in 2020, 2021, 2022, like now, decades beyond the millennium, people still get outraged at a book like that. And I look, I'm a reader, and I'm saying this, and I understand people getting outraged by a movie. Sure. Not so much music anymore. I feel like if you're getting outraged by music, hold the phone. Just don't listen. But books, I just.
And we're not making you check it out. You can put it right back on the shelf.
Well, that's I don't understand. Like, I don't get it. And also, how did you find out about this? Because you didn't read it. I mean, if you did, we'd have a conversation. But you're just outraged to be outraged. But still, outraged by a book. The millennium happened. We've moved on. Yep. Get angry at the internet like everyone else. Leave the books alone.
Yeah, I mean, if you want it, I saw a great quote today is that we are still taking our shoes off in airports for something that may almost have happened 20 years ago. And meanwhile, we have people getting into fistfights over wearing masks or whether a library represents too much of a viewpoint one way or the other. And I'm like, the sense of perspective can be sometimes lost out there. So that's why we try to provide multiple perspectives. So if you don't like this one, try on that other one over there. It's fine. I don't want to have to hear about it. I'm happy to show you where it is. And, if you want to read about, children being indoctrinated to only worship at the altar of TikTok or, that one cable news personality, he's a really erudite viewpoint, which no, but, it's because I'm pretty sure he couldn't spell erudite if it helped, even with help.
Well, the problem with erudite is that if you type it in wrong, autocorrect still has no idea what you're doing
exactly.
with it. Yeah.
That's one of those things I live for. The $20 word to describe a $5 concept.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, because you've been in the library for so long, metaphorically and otherwise, what are like some of the like misconceptions? Like, what do people still either get wrong or like myths you've heard? Sure. Because I feel like every field, every anything has its myths. Mm-hmm. Is there like a good juicy one?
I mean, we talked about this a couple of times. We are no longer a quiet space, by and large. We are a public gathering space for pretty much the entire community that we serve. While there are still quiet areas, we have like study rooms and magazine rooms for quiet reading and study. basically, if you're in the middle of the floor, it's not going to be silent. We're not going to swoop down from the ceiling tiles and just shush you aggressively, all like secret agent style, and then just zip line back up into
wrong.
I know, right? One thing that is true, there are a lot of people who love cardigans, and I do not get it. They love cardigan sweaters, man. It's mystifying.
Is the library still a place to go on a hot day?
It is.
Okay. Do your numbers go up in the summer?
Our numbers, yeah, I would say our numbers go up pretty much starting from, let's say, April.
Okay.
So not summer, but I mean, being in the mid-Atlantic, it might as well be.
Yeah. Once the humidity hits 112%.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. When birds kind of like pop in the sky and you have squab wafting to the ground, just like manna from heaven.
Yes.
That's Baltimore. No. Yeah. So pretty much from April through probably end of October, we see a significant spike in people coming in. It does noticeably trend downward pretty much in September when school is more or less back into it. And so right now we're going to enter the really quiet period from like November through March-ish. And then April onwards, it's going to be, first it'll be spring break. And then starting in May.
Wait, hold on. You see an uptick for spring break?
It's starting around that. It's
okay.
It's when a lot of projects for schools start getting assigned those last quarter projects. So they come to the library because, okay, we'll just do all of our group work there. I'm in the middle of 2 elementary schools, a middle school, and not too far away is a high school. So everybody comes here for their projects.
Okay, for group time.
Yeah, pretty much for group time. So starting around that time, so around springish break, you've been assigned this last leg of work. You got to get this done. So post spring break, you come in, you do that. May is when we start the war drums for the summer reading program.
Okay.
The study, boom, boom, boom. And June onwards, it's just bonkers. Just grade A crazy. When we were closed up last year for in-person services, we only had curbside, like a lot of other places did. We had a walk-up table, and I'm not making this up when I'm telling you that we had, on average, about 400 people, a quarter of what we would see on a daily basis.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, a third. I didn't get into librarianship for math. A third of our daily door count coming in a highly compressed time period to pick up holds, to check out material that we had put out on display. It was insane, but we did amazing work with that. So what else is that? And libraries, depending on where you go, they are not slow. They will be fast-paced for usually different reasons. For mine, it's the programs and that we offer the story times and so on. So there'll be a lot of traffic for story time, which then means a lot of traffic at the circulation desk to check out. For other branches, they're near certain public transit routes. So people getting off, they're coming in there to check their email or apply for jobs or any number of other things. So no library is ever really truly slow. When you put what that library's primary function, reason for existence. Yeah. It once you realize that, it's like, no library is truly slow. It'll look slow to the outside observer, but it usually isn't. It can be pretty frenetic depending on where you are.
So if that's the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you? I was gonna give you like a platform, like to be like, come to your local library. But like, if you're busy, maybe I should be like, wait until the slow season. Now, like, wait until the winter and go to your public library, and then, strike up a conversation with your local Matt.
Well, and again, knocking on wood, we are one of the better staff branches. So even though it's busy, we can usually make the time to help. What people should understand for their libraries is that we do our level best to help all the time. But everything from a combination from shortage of funding, which usually means then a shortage in staffing, to just an overwhelming demand from the public for our attention, time, and resources, we can't always necessarily give you the time that you would hope for. We can get, what we usually do is we can say, we'll spend 10, 15 minutes with you. But if it goes on longer than that, like if I have to fix your iPad to try and download ebooks, but you don't have your Apple ID password or anything else like that, what we'll do is we'll stop. We'll say, let's regroup. Let's book an appointment. You and me, solid hour where we get this knocked out of the park. You get your ebooks on your Amazon, iPad, Kindle, Android, whatever you want to call it. And I've heard everything. And we'll get you out of there. So for my system, we're pretty well equipped to help people out with this. There's lots of branches out there where we have a mobile law van. We have lawyers go around the county to provide sort of quick legal clinic stuff. We have social workers now who are going to embed in certain libraries and kind of rotate between branches here and there to help people with things from navigating social services websites, applying for benefits, take your pick.
Yeah. Libraries
do a lot of things. And it's not just about the books. It's about connecting people with their resources. And, you know, we have a lot of really just amazing, very caring people who do this kind of thing. So, you know, yeah, the books and everything else is always going to be important, but coming into a library and finding people who can get you started on the path to the right answer for what you're looking for, you know, I mean, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
I wanted to come on here after this conversation and tell you to be nice to librarians because, especially in Matt's case, where he is part of a public library system, understaffed and overworked is almost part of the job description, which is true, but that's not what I want to focus on. I want to focus on a quote from author Neil Gaiman who said, quote, "Google can bring you back 100,000 answers. A librarian can bring you back the right one," unquote. Matt's been at this a while. I asked him about recommendations. And while he has fun with his librarian picks, he has people that seek him out to recommend things. He is a part of the process that helps us find not just information, but the right information. We oftentimes forget that sometimes there can be more information on a topic to better help our understanding. We forget this because we are busy and we are bombarded with so much information that even when we seek it out for clarification or education or even just a better understanding of our world, we take the least amount possible because we are so overwhelmed. Don't be overwhelmed. And perhaps the key to not being overwhelmed is to unplug and go to the library. Perhaps, like Matt's library, one of your local libraries is a library of things. Perhaps there are opportunities for adventure in the real world, in addition to those that can be had inside the pages of a book. And they're all just waiting for you at your local library. You can find a library near you by going to worldcat.org/libraries, even when you aren't at home. Because when was the last time you went into a library outside of a scholastic setting? And, if I may be so presumptuous, why has it been so long? Thanks for listening to the Palmer Files, episode 60. As a reminder, all links are available in the show notes, and now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can tweet me at Agent Palmer, my guest Matt at Psionic M, that's PSIONICM, and this show at the Palmer Files. You can visit Matt at the library or watch him play video games on twitch.tv/psionicmonkey, where he is a variety streamer playing whatever strikes his fancy. Email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. All right, Matt, do you have one final question for me?
What is your favorite novel?
All right, favorite novel. Well, I feel like
We'll keep it to fiction this time.
we'll keep it to fiction. All right, so I feel like there's a part of me, because this came up in a recent episode, or a recent after question. I don't know, one of the two, which was, what book would you not want to would you want to forget and reread again? And I said The Great and Secret Show by Clive Barker, because I'm afraid to reread it, so I'd rather forget about it altogether and reread it. But that, to me, is not a favorite novel, because a favorite novel to me is something that you just read over and over and over again. And in that regard, it could be any number of things. Right now, it's going to be one of the authors that I keep going back to, right? So narrowing it down, I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to do this, but Clive Barker's Galilee is an amazing love story.
Okay.
But it's not. So it's so much more than that. And that's one that I have read a couple times, and I love it every single time I read it. Michael Crichton, you know what? I actually think The Lost World is one of the best books ever written. It reads like a play on an island. It's nothing like the movie. And look, I still love Jurassic Park, but The Lost World is just so, I don't know, something else about it. And then, I've read all the Daytons, but I've been reading through all the Daytons, so I've never gone back. I haven't reread any of the Daytons. But Douglas Copeland, however, I think Microsurfs might be up there as well as one of those, like, super, I could read this book over and over again. So I gave you a bunch right there of, like,
yes, you did.
These are a bunch that I can read over and over again. Of them right now, probably Galilee's the leader in the clubhouse. Okay. But that's also because of the ones I mentioned. It's the only one I have read multiple times. The others I want to read again and again, but who has the time to read again and again when I just told you in the episode I got a third of my house that I still need to read? So, like, rereading these is not likely to happen anytime soon. But I have to say Galilee by Clive Barker, and it's just one of those, it's fantasy, it's romance, it's got a little bit of that, like, historical mystique. It does have, like, elements of a Harlequin romance, like small elements, but it's also supernatural and, like, so much more. So it crosses so many genres, which might be one of the reasons I can just keep rereading it, because it's like so much other things, and depending on your mood, you might pick up different things from it. So I guess Galilee, final answer. But in fairness, had you asked favorite book, I would probably still go with the rereading concept and still go with a novel, because I don't know, of all the things I've ever reread, I don't think I've ever reread any nonfiction. For me, I read nonfiction and I learn from it and I'm done. And I keep it on my shelf because, number one, I'm a collector, and number two, I just, maybe one day I'll want to look up that quote in that thing one time, but I'm still more likely to just flip through a piece of nonfiction that I've already read. Whereas fiction, I will eventually, if I ever finish reading all of the other books, not in the world, but just in my house, I will revisit them.
I'm smirking a little bit just because what you were saying about having that nonfiction book on your shelf, just in case you might need a quote from that someday. I can't tell you the number of interactions I have in a given week of people who are like, I read this book in 1996. And I'm hoping you still have it on your shelf. And I'm like, oh, honey, this is.
Well, I know
What book was it?
I mean, I know libraries purge, but you do hold on to some of those things, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we hold on to material as long as it still circulates. If it checks out even once in a year, it lives another day, so to speak, or it lives another year, really.
Okay.
but it is not really as much of a focus of our collection development process to have
every
material
book, every written.
Pretty much. Our contemporaries in the Baltimore City system, they're much more likely to be like, yeah, sure, we'll just throw it in red dot storage. And, imagine like the end of Indiana Jones with the crates and everything else. And it's not a stretch to just imagine that some poor person just wandering around there, just like, yeah, sure, we'll just throw it up on that shelf.
So it does beg the question, though. Like, in the library proper, the Dewey Decimal System is like reigns supreme, and we can always find books. But in red dot storage, that can't still be the case.
So it gets worse because my library system uses Dewey Decimal. Our contemporaries in Baltimore City use the Library of Congress classification system. Oh, yeah. And it gets even worse. There are some library systems that even go as far as to just ditch the numbers entirely, and they just label it based on the subject matter. So,
like a bookstore.
Yeah, so pretty much like a bookstore.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can understand how that would be good for the user, like the consumer, because, I'm used to browsing. Well, how many, like what every bookstore I'm about to announce, except for Barnes and Noble, is gone. Like, oh yeah, I'm used to looking at Borders or Walden or those things don't exist anymore. So like, all right, but I do understand it a little bit because that's how. All right.
But yeah, so it's fine for when you're dealing with subjects like theology, like you could say theology Christian, theology Buddhism, theology Islam, theology Judaism.
Yes.
However, both Dewey Decimal and Library of Congress classifications, and I cannot talk intelligently on cataloging in this kind of stuff because that was a class I almost did not pass in my master's in library science courses. I was not a good cataloging student.
That just doesn't seem like fun.
It's you have to have a certain mindset and an almost savant-like level of patience to figure out how to do that stuff. And I bought our team I just sent them gift cards. I'm like, thank you, because Jesus Christ, I don't want to do this. Thank you for doing this. Now, knock on wood, a lot of our publishers and suppliers just submit these Dewey Decimal records for us automatically, so we don't have to do a lot of extra stuff. We might finesse the numbers a little bit just to keep them more or less in line with our shelving, but nothing radical. So yeah, there's Dewey Decimal, there's Library of Congress. Library of Congress, I still don't understand it, but it's also the most comprehensive out of them.
Okay.
Melville Dewey, there's a motion underfoot to kind of move away from Dewey Decimal because Melville Dewey he's a bit problematic. His system would classify things like homosexuality as mental illness or
okay.
Yeah, so some of the, to the average user, no one's going to know that because those numbers have been reclaimed for another purpose. But anybody it's a very library-centric problem. Be like, oh, Melville Dewey, horrible racist, homophobe, sexist pig. I mean, he was
I'm not laughing because of anything other than they all were. Like the telescope named after James Webb, like he did a lot. He helped us get to the moon. Kind of a piece of shit. Like, but helped us get to the moon though. And I understand some people don't see the balance at all. Like, oh no, but that's another time.
Right.